Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the pleasure of Spencer Gallagher on the show. Good afternoon to you, Spencer.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, good to have you on. You are an agency founder and you've exited a top 8 UK digital agency many years ago. And over the last sort of 10 years, you've been dedicating your time to supporting independent agencies and founders to scale up their business through your business, Cactus. You're also the author of a book called Agencynomics, which is all about helping agency owners, founders, and shareholders on how to scale a business from start to the first 5 million and beyond in revenue. And today we're going to be exploring culture. We're going to be looking at flat organizational structures along with resistance to change. Before we get into that, Spencer, I'd love to know what you love about what you do.
I guess, I've always been an achievement-driven person because I kind of felt like I failed school early on in life. So I was always trying to justify some level of achievement or success. And then once I built my first company and sold it, it's really weird. That kind of transition now into getting sort of more, let's say, more gratification from making other people successful. So today, the thing I love the most is helping others achieve success. So by supporting, other entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders growing their businesses, seeing them achieve a level of success, that's really where I get my kicks.
Fantastic. And so we're going to be talking culture today and a little bit about that. And obviously you've grown a business, sold a business, you experience businesses that you work with. From your perspective, what's culture all about?
Well, that's a really big question, isn't it? What's culture all about? I think, it's funny. I guess it was, over the years because I've always been in people businesses. I think I started off in retail with, working alongside big teams of people. And when I had my own agency, being a service business, we're a people business. I think the importance of, understanding that, bringing together a collection of people who can all, hopefully endorse the same values and behaviors, and embrace those and come together to create some kind of, an environment that is, for me, hopefully, that is one that, can bring a lot of fun, friendship, learnings, and if you can bring that into the workplace, it creates the best of environments. So, Peter Drucker always said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I remember when I first read that, when I read a lot of his management consultancy books back in the day. It's true, for us as a business, Cactus, we are a culture-led M&A business now, and an agency growth advisory, which means that we only really work with people who care about their culture, who care about their people, who are able to create the right environments for their people to thrive, to create the right leadership environments, podcasts on leadership, where, where people are able to become the best versions of themselves and be inspired and encouraged to go on that journey. So for me, culture is a really, really important part of any business. And it fundamentally really sits at the heart, especially in the world that I live in and work in today, in agency space. Cultures are particularly important, to all of those businesses, because ultimately they are people businesses. They don't have products and widgets. They just are all about the people.
Yeah, and I think we often forget that businesses are all about people. Whether you're a service or a product business, it's people that matter, isn't it? And creating an environment, which is what I guess culture does, really, to help people thrive. Just going back to your business that you sold many years ago, were you intentional about the culture of that organization, or did it just sort of happen and just sort of
Well,
evolve as you went?
yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I was 28 when I started Blue Halo, and I'd left school and started working at 16. And so from the age of 16, I had teams working, for me, from a very young age. It started off with just Saturday staff, and by the time I was 17, I had full-time staff. And by the time I was like 20, I think it was probably about 22, I had 100 people working for me. And then, and And I thought, having worked with larger teams, and worked with thousands of employees probably by the time I was 28, I thought that I kind of knew everything. And then when you actually run it set your own business up, it sounds a bit weird, but it's like when you work for somebody else, culture is created and organized by other people in the business, so to speak. Your people are onboarded through processes to test that you have the right behaviors, you have shared values. And when you do something for yourself, you kind of just, you meet great people. You tend to recruit people that you feel connect to your core values at first. So what I'm trying to say is, when you start a business, I would say actually a lot of the things that you can learn working elsewhere, or the support you have elsewhere, you don't have. So you end up. So for me, was it intentional? I think no. I thought that it would be intentional, but I think the reality is that I tended to recruit and take people on that I recognized had similar values to myself. And it wasn't really until I was probably a few years in that I realized that I needed to stop that, and I needed to make sure that I was more intentional about the type of behaviors and values I wanted to have in the business. Without question, our tagline at Blue Halo was creativity cultivated, and actually the cultivation of our culture was fundamental to that tagline. So it did become intentional, and certainly we talk about selling the business. I think I want to make it really clear to everyone: the business wasn't sold just so I could make money. It was sold intentionally because the culture had reached a point, the team had reached a point where I was probably not in a position to help them fulfill their ambitions. Almost they were starting to outgrow the company's growth because their abilities had got. And when you're trying to scale a business, you've got a team of wonderfully talented people. I was almost failing them by not becoming part of something bigger where they could have more career paths, career opportunities. Organically growing a business is great, but it does reach a point where sometimes, you do need more help to be able to get to those next levels. I think the biggest testament I always say is I still get messages today, 10, 12 years later, 13, but we're now 15 years later, actually, thanking me for me taking them on, for the opportunities that I was able to give them and the opportunities I left them with as well when we sold the business. And I think that's really, really nice, legacy to have as well when I look back. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, interesting talking about scaling, and obviously you weren't intentional at the start, but then started to get a bit more thoughtful about culture. And when people start to scale a business, how do we then bring that, I guess, culture along with the size? As you say, you got to a point where you felt you needed to sell it because to give the opportunities, and that's incredible. Actually, you're thinking that way in terms of helping other people, which just says what you're about, really. And so, but yeah, how do we sort of take that learning, what you've learned, and how do we sort of do that in a business where actually you're scaling it, but then scale the culture, because things change, don't they?
They do. It's really great. And this is probably one of the most fundamental things that I do today. When I go into an agency today, or our company does Cactus, the teams go in, they're often at the size where they are, normally, up to the first 15, 20 employees, and they have family type feels to them. That it's small. The business, it's a flat structure. Everyone knows everybody. Sometimes there's friends and family in there because that's the way a lot of businesses start. Not always, but often those businesses are really nice, and you go in and they're like, you know what, we've got a lot of things really nice here. About the culture is the foundation of the culture is, because when most people start their own business, they have these visions of creating their own utopia. They didn't like a previous line manager or a previous boss, and they said, well, I start a business, I'm going to do it my way, and they try to create something in the nicest possible way with the nicest culture, and it does have a friends and family feel. And what I've been trying to do in the last, certainly in the last sort of 13, 12 years now at Cactus, and actually before I had business, was trying to understand, how do you retain that culture of a smaller organization as you scale? Because what I noticed with my own business was, as I recruited more and more senior people that came from more corporate backgrounds, so came in the political approaches, the bruises of working in a big organization, like having to hide behind email and blaming other people and not trying to take extreme ownership on things. And so actually, I think I learned a lot of that by trying to scale and trying to act more like a traditional 20th century business. But then what I did myself was I realized that I wanted to try and go back to how I was and protect the business that we were at 1 million with 15, 16 employees. And today, going into business now, I try very hard to help those companies understand that there is another way. There is another way to bring in line management, bring in hierarchical structures. There is another way to grow a team. And yes, there are still some of the really important business management techniques that you need to bring into those businesses. You do need to have some leadership principles. You do need to have some organizational values and behaviors for individuals, but you can do that in a non-hierarchical management way and build it much more on leadership and coaching. And that's what I try and do with those businesses today, to try and help them scale while retaining their cultures that they've built, that they want to build. And that's kind of a lot to do with my day job, on the team's day job today.
So let's explore that whole non-hierarchical way, because obviously when you get to sort of 10, 15, you can reasonably have quite a flat structure. When you start hitting 30, 50 and beyond, suddenly people put in the old structures, don't they, and all the way down. And that can be helpful because it gives you guidelines, gives you a sense of where you are in the environment of the organization. But how do you think we should be doing it to try and keep that, I guess, that small company fluidity, innovation, turning on its head, pace, which I guess that's what we sometimes want as well. We want to keep the pace of the small business. And we always talk of, you go to a big business. I've worked for massive businesses and like turning tankers. They really are so slow, but actually, there's ways of doing it. And I'd like to explore how we can do that to make even big businesses very nimble as well and how they approach things.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a multifaceted approach. It's not, again, a linear approach. And you've seen in business the transition to more agile working, organizational transformation significantly in the last probably 5 to 6 years has moved, to a more agile approach. And I think, well, just generally, when I look at the clients I work with, they used to deliver everything in a very waterfall methodology, and now they build things in a much more modular, agile way, so they can be more responsive and they can be and it's more progressive and more modern. But the first challenge of all, when you have this approach, and I find it particularly if you already are an established business with a hierarchy, is it's very, very difficult to move from there. But I'm fortunate I'm going in early enough when people appreciate and value the culture as it is, and I'm able to say to them, would you like to try and scale this and protect it? I have done this successfully through to over 100 people, so I know that it does scale, it does work. And the premise really is, first of all, and it goes back to some of those classic kind of management leadership principles that are always there, which is you've got to be able to find intrinsic motivation from your team. So we know intrinsic motivation comes from purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And we know that we need to trust the people that work for us, and we need to move from a controlling environment to one where we are empowering and trusting people. Okay. And to do that, it takes leadership, people in leadership in businesses, and often in the smaller stages, you're going to have a CEO or a founder in that business to be able to accept the fact that, that people will make mistakes, and you have to have a culture where people can make a mistake and it's okay. As long as you learn the lesson and don't make it twice or 3 times, it's fine. And so the first thing is you've got to build in a trusted team. You've got to ensure that the people coming into your business understand that you are going to operate in a flat organizational structure, which means that you are going to be trusted, empowered to work autonomously, to take ownership, and to deliver against the roles and responsibilities that you have in your business. But also you're going to have collective roles and responsibilities to be part of wider squads and teams to take on ownership to solve other problems. And if you are a leader in this business, your job is not to control, it is to to support the people that what your colleagues are working also where you can, because you have more expertise. And this is where the problem happens, because if you have an organization and you want to build a flat structure, you can't recruit people who used to be managers who want to be managers, because they want power, they want to be in control, they see their career progression being, you know, very different to the way that we would position it now, more as a meritocracy, which is all about people in the organization can grow and have a career path based on their abilities to perform their job, rather than an ability to manage others. And so it's a first of all, you know, there's the multifaceted approach. You've got to get the original team to buy into it and be happy that they aren't going to become line managers, but they will be able to have a career progression through their abilities and the value they bring to the organization. That's why they'll be paid in the future. And then when you bring people in, you've got to make sure they understand that as well, you know, because I would say that the salaries and career paths of the people in our flatter structural organizational structures are often in excess of those in the hierarchy ones, because they're more self-aware of how they add value to the organization, you know. And that doesn't mean that, let's say, for example, as you grow, you have certain responsibilities that are needed that may be more significant, where normally a line manager might have come in to take ownership. We just bring people in to have roles and responsibility to take ownership of there, and they will work alongside other people in their teams. Again, you know, I've had junior people come into organizations, you know, without any line management, but they still have to work alongside people, still have to learn. I encourage all the people in those businesses to not have a manager run, for example, their personal development plans. We encourage the team members to own their own careers, you know, and it's a culture shift of, you know, people coming into a business going, what do I do next? To, right, let me take ownership on what I need to do and how I need to deliver that in line with the business objectives, align with what my colleagues are doing and my roles and responsibilities. And so it's yes, you know, it's a fascinating approach. And I first launched it myself in 2004 at Blue Halo. And you know, there were some lessons to learn. It's never, you know, I don't think any organizational approach is right or wrong. I think there are always going to be challenges with any approaches, but ultimately I found that, and this is give you an example of how it worked. When we were doing 2 million in billings at Blue Halo, which was, you know, a good, when I first probably put the flat structure in place after twice trying to scale the hierarchies, and it just not working. We just lost our culture. We lost our essence of who we were and how we approach working with clients and each other. We had 40 people in the business, but by the time we put the flat structure in, we got to 3 million in billings. We had just 32 people in the business. So we had become 1/3 more efficient, with higher customer satisfaction, higher staff morale, by moving to hierarchy. And I remember Peter Drucker always saying in his books, he said, and he actually said this, even though he built 100 level layers of hierarchies in like some of the big IT firms in the States. I remember reading and shiver went down my spine when I read it, because no one ever talked about it, but how he said that if you could remove hierarchies from organizations, and he believed you could do it through the right empowerment of the individuals in the organization, he said you would effectively increase any organizational efficiency and profitability by 30%. And that was exactly the number that we had discovered, you know, ourselves. So so I think that, you know, the results and the output of doing this are great, but it does take a lot of planning. You know, it's a lot of planning. You have got to make sure that you onboard the right people, the right mindset. You've got to have an existing team who are happy to do that. And the biggest challenge, just to lay it down to everyone so you know, is someone new will come into the business and say, yeah, but my last company never did it that way. And that's one of the problems I've had the most, is that it's almost like, I think the reason we have so many hierarchical organizational structures, I'm sure you've read Frederick Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations. If you haven't, anyone, please go read it. But, you know, the reason we ended up with the 20th century hierarchical model was because it was the military and the church had the same model. And we just thought, well, if it works in the military and church, it must work in everyday business life. And it started off, actually goes against probably everything that we believe in today in society, you know, the privilege of of the hierarchy of of the military, of the church, choosing who they put into lead positions, and etc. And actually, when you actually start to forward the clock and start to test and try, some of the techniques that Brian Tracy talked about, holacracy, when you start to look at some of the progressive organizations that have adopted flatter organizational structures, you'll see that actually there is a really potentially a very more progressive way of doing things, but we're all just so set in our ways and scared of change. And it's not, that we're just going to go, we used to do it that way, so let's just keep doing it the same way that we used to do. And rather than just saying, well, what if we did change things? Definitely.
I guess it's fear, isn't it, that gets in the way. That's what happens. It's the unknown. We've never done it before. We're unsure. And I guess if you're a big organization, if you're like 200 people, where do you start to try and take it from a hierarchical? I mean, it's all right when you're growing from 10 to 15.
Yeah.
You can sort of grow with it, and that's the way you're going to do it. And you can employ people with that right mindset, make them aware of this. But how do you take something that might be very fixed at 200 people? How would you introduce that? How do you start to turn that into more of a flat structure approach, making people more, I guess, accountable, collective responsibilities, no titles, all on the same level, so to speak?
Probably like any change management program, you've got to start with a plan. You've got to start with a vision. You have to show why you're trying to go there. What are you hoping to achieve? What's in it for me as an employee in the business? Like as a team member, what's in it for me as a colleague? And I think if you can.
So what is in it for the colleagues then? What do they get out of it?
Well, I think first of all, what's the latest Gallup Q12 survey says? It's something like over 80% of individuals are unsatisfied with their line manager, or the main reason they're unhappy in their job is their line manager. I don't have the exact data to hand, but I'm sure we could pull that up, and we could show that the first thing will be is that, from my experience, I have it every day. I'm in board meetings almost every day of the month, and and every day in a board meeting, it'll be someone's just left. I'll ask the question why, and they said they didn't like their line manager. And this is in the business where I don't have them in every business flat structures. And I'm like, well, why? What happened? Oh, well, the line manager wouldn't approve holiday, and the person took it personally. I'm like, okay, well, like silly little things that cause people to leave jobs. I think that what's in it for them? Well, I think it's first of all, as you rightly said, it's starting to trust people in your team. They can take better charge of their own career. They can start to view their own personal development plan, map out where they want to go, take more personal ownership in their career rather than relying on a line manager to decide where their career is going or not going, which often can have hidden agendas in there. I think you did hit the nail on the head about if I was a 200 person organization, what would I do? I honestly, I probably would have to pick a division and probably run a pilot and show the rest of the business how it worked, because I think it would be hard to wholesale move a large. I've seen large organizations do this. I'm sure, if you read Harvard Business Review like I do, there's quite a few examples of companies that have done this. But I noticed, I think was the famous one was back in the day was Zappos. And Tony Hsieh, God rest his soul, passed away a couple of years ago. He said to everyone in the business, look, we're going to move to a flat structure. If management and power is important to you, he said, then let's talk about helping you find another job in a new career in a new area and another company. And he lost 30% of his workforce because those people saw management as important to them. But nevertheless, he then ended up, because he realized he'd lost his culture. If you read his book, he had Amazon bought his business for $1 billion because he had, he was one of the most famous values-driven organizations out there, and he decided as they grew, they lost that culture. He wanted to go back to how it was, and so he believed that by creating the flatter structure that would solve that problem. So I think if you're a 200-person agency, you're going to need to have a good change management plan. You probably want to pick a division and try and start to show people how to run that as a pilot. And yes, there will be some change involved. What would be in it for the team members that I've seen and firsthand, and also through the clients? I think once you start trusting your employees more to take more control of their career and their contribution to the company, you unlock something very special. Yeah. Intrinsic motivation. It's like once you've got a team of intrinsically motivated people, I mean, just so you, I mean, an inspired employee delivers 2.5 times more than a satisfied employee in an organization. So, you know, if you can empower someone to have intrinsic motivation, to feel more inspired about what they're doing, your organization is just going to get a lot more out of people. Yeah. And so, yeah.
But it seems to me it's having a flat structure, sort of non-hierarchy, is the sort of fullness of being completely empowered and enabled as an individual, where, you know, there's a lot of talk about empowerment, and I think more people are, not in all organizations, more empowered and more free to sort of do how they think is appropriate for what they're doing, and there's a bit more of a soft touch from a line manager point of view. I think there's a lot more of that. And I know when I was in the corporate world, there's a lot more, you have to be, you're in charge of your own destiny, of your own developments, and so that obviously is helpful. In terms of the development side, how does it work in that context of flat structure, where you have your line manager in the sort of more structural way, who is a more of a coach to you in some ways? And I know when I was line managing, I wouldn't be just telling people, I'd be, you know, helping to spot talent, some of the blind spots, and then helping enabling them either through other resource or inputs they needed. Where does that come in that context? Not that they didn't take ownership, but we all need some external input to help developers at some point.
Yeah, I think you know, when I was younger, people often used to get the hierarchical chart. They used to turn it on its head and say, this is how an org chart should really be. And I think, you know, what I try to do is, when we draw our org charts out, which are horizontal, obviously not pyramid shaped, is making sure that those people who are able to inspire others, you know, or to coach others, to support others, are just positioned underneath, not on top, you know. And just, it sounds stupid, but it's just small little details like that. In the organizations often you go into, you know, you've got this hierarchy, and at the bottom you've got some real talented people, and they just feel like they're worthless because they sit at the bottom. And so first of all, just positioning the leaders and as coaches underneath, and highlighting their job is to support people. And that alone, as soon as you're starting to support your colleagues, it ends up being, well, you're not a threat to me, you're not controlling my career, or, you know, you're here genuinely to authentically make me a better version of myself. And so I think that's, you know, that is a very, very important part of this process. And I think also, I think people, I mean, so what? Yeah. So where's the question going? Have I answered the question there? Really?
Well, it's about, I suppose for me, it's the development side. Is it more of a more fluid?
Individuals.
Yeah. So is it more ad hoc, as in you're inspired by somebody, or actually you might say to somebody, actually, could you just help me with this, because I need some support on this? Is it that sort of more fluid rather than somebody assigned to you as such, which is obviously a line manager approach?
I did a little bit of both. I think within each kind of team area of the business, I think there are coaches that should be assigned. There's always going to be naturally more experienced people in the meritocracy who are able to share their experience to support and help the development of others, and hopefully that will be really clear. But I think that the key thing for me is, and this is what I do, I guess if I tell you how I approach this with companies, is when I ask the individuals to work on their own personal development plans and take ownership, a lot of the time they find that difficult because they're used to being almost given it and told what to do, and, you know, they're managed through one-to-ones. But to actually take that and then find somebody in the business who's a leader in any area to be your accountability partner. And so for me, in a flatter structure, if there's an issue around training, well, the budget, they speak to the finance manager. If there's an issue around them improving their individual skills in a particular area, it's probably the leader within their section of the business. But let's say, for example, it's someone who wants to aspire to be, in the end, I don't know, a consultant or a coach or in a different division. There's nothing to stop them reaching out and saying, hey, would you mind being my accountability partner? I've been into businesses that I've been on a non-exec for, and I've had members of the team come to me and say, one day I want to actually be a consultant. So at the moment, I'm kind of working in the business doing a design role. I'd like to, But I wondered, could all of my investment training and development is going to be around making me a better consultant advisor. Would you mind being my accountability partner for my, and that, you know, so I do think having that fluidity, as the words you use there, is important. But it's about just trusting the team to be able to be grown up enough to find out who they can connect to, who they can get as mentors, as coaches, to help them achieve their career path, their goal, rather than it being almost in the hands of the organization. I think I find this as a business leader a little bit difficult when sometimes, you know, employees are expecting their companies to be in charge of their career path, when I do think actually, you know, when your team members leave their house in the morning, they don't ring up someone to ask how to get the bus to work, or how to pay their mortgage, or how to pay their rent. You know, they have to figure this stuff out themselves. And I think when we figure out things for ourselves and we take ownership on those things, we're more likely to get to deliver on them. Yeah, but we do need accountability partners, and we do need coaches to help us get there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the important thing, is that accountability piece, and that helping you support you through coaching or whatever it may be. How do we change? Because to me, it's a mindset change here, like all these things. And we've had hundreds of, tens of years doing this way. We've all ingrained in it. We've observed it. And how do we sort of shift that mindset with people, whether it's in an organization that's shifting, or you're interviewing people who are coming in, to make sure that they've got the mindset, or that point where they could embrace this? Because some people, this is quite scary, because it's like anything. When the guardrails have gone, it's all a bit like, I'm not entirely sure where to put myself, where I'm going to sit.
Yeah.
How do I fit into this organization? Who's going to help me? It's can be quite scary, can't it? It's unknown.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few layers there. I think, first of all, I think as a company, if you were thinking about moving to a flatter structure, you've probably got to have a problem, to fix, because you've got to have some kind of motivation to want to make that change. And I think if the organization has got problems with its, and you have a solution, the team that you have existing are going to be more open to hearing about a new approach, and probably more willing to try something to solve the current challenge that's there. Yeah. So if it ain't broke, it's going to be hard to fix it. And I always say, for organizational transformation, I probably wouldn't start to change things if it's working, right? For example. And then I think
just with that though, you say if it's working, but if you're not tapping into what you think could be even more so, like you did, you went to a flat structure.
Yeah,
and you took off
twice, and I'd had hierarchies. What I'd learned was, in the hierarchy, that I got interviewed by the Financial Times. It was called Recruiting the Grown-Ups as You Scale. And I was explaining how I'd brought all of these senior execs in from IBM and other big places to help me put this management layer into scale. And what I found is that they didn't have any extreme ownership. They'd come in and they would do their job, but if they made a mistake, they would like blame everybody else. There was no, because they had come from businesses where, they weren't trusted. It wasn't a safe place to work, where you could make a mistake, say you're sorry, you learned a lesson. And so I tried twice to build hierarchies, and both times it failed. And so in a way, I did build the flat structure out from that motivation. I hear what you're saying. You're saying, well, if this company's, doing okay, they're a good company, they want to become a great organization, then they see flat structure as a way to do that. The first thing you're going to have to do is get the buy-in from the people in the organization. And to do that, you've either got to, show them the problem, the challenge the business faces today. We're a good company, but we want to become a great company. And here are some good examples of people that have maybe made some of these transitions, or the rationale and reason why you want to move to having a flatter structure. And I would also lower expectations. Whenever I do this with the clients, I'm always saying to them, look, tell your teams that it's not going to be perfect straight away, because there's no utopia overnight. It's going to be a journey of you finding your own uniquenesses in this method, or in this new approach you're taking. But ultimately, there's nothing to stop you having individual roles and responsibilities and collective roles and responsibilities, and that solving the hierarchical problem. Because ultimately, as you grow your business, you're building a business of specialists, not generalists. And so every problem you have in the business can be solved by somebody, either you individually or collaboratively. So is that answering your question? Or?
I think so, yeah. So What just finally, really, in terms of what are the sort of obstacles? What gets in the way of shifting to a flatter structure?
Just genuinely the people in the business who often will say, I've worked somewhere else. We didn't used to do it that way in our company. And there's rose tinted glasses because they might remember the things that did work in that business, maybe not holistically the stuff behind the scenes that didn't work. So normally it's getting buy-in. I think also leaders that aren't prepared enough. I spent 200 hours, over 200 hours of learning and listening on flat organizational structures. I read everything I could. I listened to everything I could. And that was on top of the fact I'd already built them and done it myself in my own business. So even though I'd done that, I then went away and re-educated myself. And I think sometimes people might, feel this is a way they should go, but they haven't really thought through all of the challenges that are going to come up, within this. So, I guess in the heart of it, the biggest question from the team members is, what's my career path? Because that's where they worry. And I think it's explaining that, we have people who sit in a flat structure who aren't necessarily leaders, but they are actually earning the largest amounts of money because they're bringing the most amount of value into the organization. Because they've understood how they can add more value to the organization, rather than just having a position where they're controlling people, controlling entities within the business. So, I think it's, the most important thing is for the leaders to really submerge themselves in this, meet other people who are running flat organizational structures, ask them and learn and try to come up with a very comprehensive strategy. The book, actually, Holacracy, is a really good book for anyone to read to get started. The problem I have with Holacracy is that it's written by an engineer, a highly detailed engineer, who believed that you have to have a huge amount of rules in place, a huge charter in place to be able to create a fully empowered, trusted organization. And I kind of understand that to a certain degree, but I've learned in my business that there's a lot of common sense that just has to be applied, which is, the common sense here is basically that, you can't bully your colleagues. There's certain things you just can't do in life, right? Which is just, basic manners and courtesy. And so what I would say is that sometimes you do need to build these rules into a framework. Staff handbook would have these kind of things in. I mean, in some flat structures, they might over elaborate on the rules to try and put the framework around, you are fully empowered, you are fully trusted, but you can't just go and spend, excessive amounts of money, on certain projects without getting support from colleagues from your wider team. So I think, but I think if you read Holacracy, it will start to probably make the most sense. The way he articulates it is very clear. The first time I ever heard of a flat structure was actually a book called Maverick. Did you ever read the book Maverick?
No, I haven't, no.
The 1980s, and a guy called Ricardo Semler. Wonderful business book, like light years. I mean, 50-year-old book, and he's probably 50-year-old book, and he was talking about things then that was so progressive. He was sort of challenging, why does everyone wear a suit in his company? And we, every day, well, we just always do. We always, and actually, it's a really good example. We talk about flat structures and the way we dress at work. And, for years, we all wore a certain way, but there was no reason for that other than we just felt it was the right thing to do. And then someone sort of said, well, why do we wear suits? I don't know. Does anyone have a clue? It suddenly became a reality that actually, dress may not be always necessarily the code, the right thing to have in the right certain organization. So I think that I think it is important that lose my train of thought now. Sorry, I'm going on about dress code. But Ricardo, sorry, he started to identify the fact that he didn't believe that people needed to have a hierarchy. He started to play with this idea of, he called it sort of cells, and sort of kept it quite organic, let's say. And then I think, Brian Tracy did a great job of then taking that one step forward and bring that in. And I think since then, lots of other people, I was reading in Harvard Business Review about a large insurance firm that had introduced, squads into, collaborative teams within the business that work, in a very very flat, agile way where people work as individuals or as groups to solve the business challenges. And that's what we do. So just so you know, if you imagine an organizational structure now, it's built in 3 columns. We have our client centricity, client-centric owned. We have the talent on the right-hand side of the organization. On the left, we have the business growth team. That's typically the non-billable people who are the account, maybe the financial people, the salespeople, marketing. And then underneath we have as like a secondary organization chart, which shows the squads. It shows the where we might bring together, let's say we have a problem with mental health in the business. In the old days, you would train a line manager. You know, I would get trained as a general manager of a business to basically deal with the mental health challenges in the company. Well, that's not ridiculous. Like someone coming to me to get help with mental health, you know, I'm a Gen X. I'm just going to tell them to tough it out. I'm no good at that. You need to. That's a bit harsh. It's not true. But you know, today we do have mental health first aiders within business, and those mental health first aiders could come from anywhere in the company. And it's right. If someone has a problem with mental health, they don't go to their line manager. They go and find the best person. If someone's got a problem with their payroll, do they come to me as their line manager? No, they should go to the payroll department or the account or the financial department. So it's understanding that everyone in the business has, you know, and they will have their processes and their ways to streamline the efficiency on how they solve those problems. But the reality is that within the org charts we create, we have this kind of joint roles and responsibility. We have teams. So we have a sales team made up of a collection of people from above. We might have a culture team made up of the best people across the organization who, you know, eat, sleep, and drink the behaviors and values of the organization. And you can build then really nice teams and squads that can actually then take more ownership of projects that are needed to be done within the bigger organization. Yeah.
Yes, you are very passionate about this, Spencer, and I love it. I love your passion of this flat, and obviously you've seen it work and you've seen the benefits, and you know, just for me, it's that creating that environment where people take ownership, people take responsibility, and through that they become more engaged, more motivated, higher performing. Yeah. It knocks out the gatekeeper of almost the line manager, which potentially they can become a gatekeeper. And actually they can just really develop, and almost as you become entrepreneurial, and as a business you can entrepreneurial as yourself, and I think that's really, there's huge benefits, and we could obviously talk for a long time on this. I know we could, and so just for the sake of time, I do thank you for that. There's some real insights and really some challenging things there for people as well. If people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what is the best way of doing that?
Best way to do that, pop along to LinkedIn, type my name in, follow me, send me a LinkedIn message, and yeah, probably the easiest place to get hold of me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today and your insights, Spencer.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me along.